All right, so today, as you probably guessed, we're going to be talking about managing the challenges of contextual inquiry. So, my name's Brie. I am a senior UX researcher here at Toast. I've been here for about 2 years. And it wouldn't be Toast if we didn't talk about food as a restaurant tech company. So these are some of my favorite foods on the screen. So a little bit about my background. I have worked at 3 places, which if you work at all in the Boston area, you probably know all of them and are not surprised to see them. So I started my career at Wayfair as a UX researcher, and then I moved over to EF Education first, where I worked for their high school exchange year program, which was really fun. I got to work with high schoolers coming over to the US to do a high school year. I also spent a little bit of time there doing design, which was super fun. And then I came over to Toast, and now I'm doing UX research here for our consumer products. So let's dig into it. So why I love contextual inquiries. I have been lucky enough in my career to conduct contextual inquiries, there we go, at every job I have had, which has been really fun. I love them. I was actually really bummed during the pandemic to not be able to really do them anymore. And then I came to Toast, and I've had the opportunity to do a lot of them. So the first thing that I really love about contextual inquiries is there's almost always an opportunity to get food, usually to expense it from the company. And if you're not getting food, you're probably seeing someone's dog in their home, which is also one of my favorite parts. The second thing that I really love about them is it's a great chance to just get away from my computer, especially in the times of COVID, especially being at home. I work remotely most of the time, even though I'm here today. It is a great opportunity to just get up away from my desk, get away from my house, go see my neighborhood, go see my community, just get out there and experience it and talk with users. And then finally, some of the most valuable things I've actually learned as a researcher have happened while doing contextual inquiries. Dig into a little bit of what those things were as we go through, but they were certainly things that I never could have learned if I was doing a Zoom interview or even an in-office session, which I used to do a lot of when I was at Wayfair. We don't really do them as much here at Toast, but all right, so let's talk about my first ever contextual inquiry. So I was at Wayfair. I was a researcher. If you don't know Wayfair, online furniture, probably heard the commercials. I was on a team that helped consumers kind of visualize their space and help them in making furniture decisions. So it was like a 3D modeling type of situation. This was back in 2018. It was pretty cutting edge at the time. And we wanted to just better understand how consumers measured for furniture in their space, how they understood it in a physical space. And we could have brought people into the office to kind of see and maybe, say, oh, measure for a chair or measure for a couch in this office space. But we actually decided it would be better if we went into their homes, which was a little bit scary. But I said, let's go into their homes. Let's go talk to people that are measuring in real life and, doing a home redecorating project. So the first step was to go through some screening criteria. Screening criteria is really important, especially with a contextual inquiry. You're spending all this time going out into the field. You really want to make sure that you're recruiting the right people. So the first thing was finding someone that was close enough for me to commute to. I was living in Boston at the time. I'm up in New Hampshire now, but living in Boston at the time. And if you've ever lived in Boston, you know that this could be like maybe 5 miles away and could take an hour to get there. So I just had to make sure that we were recruiting people in the right range. The next thing that we wanted was someone that was in the moment. So what I meant by that was someone who is currently doing a redecorating project, someone who is currently going through the motions. So we screened for that. We asked a few questions, what projects they were working on, when were they planning on finishing it, what stage of the project were they in, and we screened for that. The next thing we wanted to screen for was that they had previous experience with what we were looking to explore. So in this case, someone that was willing to shop for furniture online, which a lot of people actually aren't. And the last thing we wanted was to get into their house and then find out, oh, I measure and then I go to Jordan's Furniture. Or like, that's not that helpful, actually, for us, thank you. So we made sure that they had shopped for furniture in the past in the screening criteria. And the last piece, which was really important, we right up front said exactly what we were planning on doing. We want to come into your home. We want to observe you in your space. The session will take about 2 hours, and we got their consent right in the screener that that's what we were going to be doing. All right, so we arrive. And we set the expectations once again with the participant, and we got ourselves set up. And then from there, the sessions were pretty open-ended. We had a few goals that we wanted. We knew what we wanted to get out of the session. And we asked them what redecorating project they were working on. And they would tell us, and they would, maybe show us. And what we really said was, can you show us? They would talk about maybe measuring for a rug or measuring for a couch, or they didn't know what curtains to purchase. And we're like, show us where the curtains are, show us what couch. And so they would take us around their home and they would talk about the challenges that they were facing, and they would point things out, and we would take them over to the computer and they would, show us how they were searching for things. And they just walked us through the process. And I got to see a lot of homes, some really nice ones and some questionable styles. But it was a lot of fun, met a lot of dogs. It was great. And so we went around with them, watched them taking photos, things like that. We were learning a ton. We were learning about their decision-making process. We were learning about just their process in general. We were learning about the challenges that people face in these kind of unique Boston homes. Again, if you've ever been in an apartment or a house in Boston, really old homes, really complex spaces. So we learned a ton. But the biggest thing that we learned that we never would have learned over Zoom is that people are really bad at measuring. Like, really bad at measuring. So we had them, again, talk to us about what they were trying to accomplish, what they were measuring for, and we asked them, show us how you measure for it. Show us how you know it's gonna fit. And my favorite was this last one. She was actually my first session ever, and it was so good. I was like, I'm never gonna top this. And honestly, I don't know if I have. This last woman told us she was looking for a new rug. And she hated buying them online because she always got the sizing wrong. And she had returned 2 rugs so far. And I'm sitting there going, as she's telling me this, okay, maybe it's an issue with how we present measurements. Maybe it's an issue with, the product got sent to her and it was wrong, the wrong size. And then I asked her to show me how she was measuring for her rug. And I figured it out. So we figured out what the problem was there. And again, what I took back to the team was, hey, the problem that we have going on here is people are really bad at measuring. It's not actually our product that is a huge issue. There were certainly improvements to be made. But what we need to do is tell the consumer, tell the participant, tell the users how they need to measure. And so what the team ended up doing was going back and they brainstormed ways to educate the users on the best way to measure in their home. So that was pretty exciting and definitely something we weren't even really considering at all before we did the research. Okay. Now let's talk about a contextual inquiry that didn't really go to plan. So the first contextual inquiry I did, pretty wildly successful. It was pretty exciting. I was like, all right, I'm feeling pretty good about this. Did a few more throughout my career, did a lot while I was at EF, and then I come to Toast. And one of my first projects at Toast was working on a product where you scan a receipt, looks like that, and you can pay on your phone. You can pay the check at a restaurant. We call it Scan to Pay, aptly named. And so I come onto the team. This is like the first thing I get introduced. Everyone's talking about Scan to Pay. I actually think Kate and Freya are here today. We go to a restaurant the very first day I was at Toast, and they go, hey, this is your product. And I was like, I actually didn't know that, but thank you. And so the team was noticing that people weren't scanning to pay that often. So they had explored it a bit from a lot of different directions, and they had dug into the guest experience, and they realized, actually, the guest experience is pretty good. One of the biggest problems, though, is servers aren't telling their guests about it. There's not really a lot of awareness of this product. So then, this was all before I joined Toast. Courtney was a big part of it. They went on site and they talked to servers, and they said, hey, what's going on? Why aren't we pushing this product? And they said, well, we don't really like not knowing when the guest doesn't, did they pay their check? Did they not? Are they walking out? We don't know. And so that's when I joined the team, was they were kind of exploring this problem space of, okay, the server needs to know that someone is paid. And so we are going to create kind of this notification system to let them know when someone is paid using Scan to Pay. So that's when I come in. And so we go on site to Smoke Shop, actually, which is right down the street. And we asked the restaurant manager if we could observe their payment notifications in action. So we had this kind of beta alpha kind of program going where we could turn it on for just that restaurant, and we wanted to go and we wanted to observe the notifications in action. And so we spent some time with the manager and the team beforehand, that's what this picture is, talking with them, explaining how it worked, kind of getting their questions, making sure they were comfortable on their shift. And we said, hey, we'd love to observe kind of these notifications in action. Let us know if you get them, throughout the shift and all of that. And so we get started and we sit down for busy dinner service and their shifts begin. And the entire night, 2 parties paid with Scan to Pay, and one of them was us. So we didn't really observe a whole lot that day when it came to the notifications for Scan to Pay, the whole reason we were there. But what we did learn after talking to servers was one of their biggest pain points throughout their busy shift was splitting the check. So if you've ever been to a restaurant with your friends, you've had to split the check, it's a pain in the butt. It's a bigger pain in the butt for servers. So when things get really busy, they rely on Scan to Pay to take away some of that burden, and Scan to Pay can't split the check. So they were like, it would be amazing if this could split the check for me. And I remember a server came over, exasperated, but was like, I have all these tables and they want to split the checks and I can't tell them to use Scan to Pay because they need to split the check, so I have to do it. And it takes so much time out of my shift. So we sat there and we looked at each other and we went, well, that's good to know. All right. And so we got back to the office after that and we messaged each other and, had a few meetings and we said, I think this splitting the check thing, I think we're onto something here. And so what ended up happening was we actually impacted the entire product roadmap. The team didn't really have splitting the check evenly or by item on the roadmap at all. And it got onto the roadmap and got released later that year, which was really exciting, about a year ago. And we're in the works to do even more of that. So we didn't get what we wanted out of that session, but we did still learn something really important, and ultimately, it ended up being worth it. All right. So I talked a bit about contextual inquiries, why they're so powerful, shared a few stories. The opportunities they provide us to learn from and hear from users in their environments and the impact they have on the product and the business. But we talked about this a little bit. I also want to acknowledge that contextual inquiries are hard. They're especially hard if you are someone that is shy, gets anxious, gets nervous, is used to being at home, doesn't really like to leave your home, doesn't really like to talk to strangers. Hard as it might be to believe, I also get anxious going and talking to new people. And so I just have to remind myself when I go and do these, when I plan these, that it is going to be worth it. Sometimes that means bringing a coworker with me, so I have a familiar face. I highly recommend bringing a coworker if you can. Having someone there that you know is so helpful. I also found that sometimes I have to hype myself up, and I will sit in the car right before a session, and maybe I'll watch some TikToks, and maybe I'll just blast some music, and then I go in, and when I say it has always been worth it to do a contextual inquiry, I'm not lying. Every time I come out, I'm like, yep, that was great, that was awesome. I get so excited. I usually end up messaging my team, something that I learned. It's always been great. So even if you are shy, even if you are anxious, bring a friend, go try it out, and the more you do them, the easier they will get. Contextual inquiries are also hard if you have never done them. There is a lot of planning that can go into a contextual inquiry. There's a lot of logistics. I'm going to talk a bit about the planning piece after this, but the preparation can feel really overwhelming, and all of the pieces to make it come together can feel really overwhelming. I promise, though, again, it is worth it. And it is helpful if you can find, someone on your team that has done it, they can guide you through it. And also, there's a ton of resources online. Go ahead and use those. That's what I did the first time I did one. I had no idea what I was doing, and I just started looking up articles, and I started talking to people on my team, and I was like, all right, what are all the things I have to consider for this? Parking and logistics, and what's the traffic gonna be, and how am I gonna record things? And I just went for it, and the first one was definitely a little rocky, minus the person measuring. And then I got better at them as I went through. Finally, contextual inquiries can also be hard if you haven't done them in a while. Courtney talked a little bit about this. We mentioned it already. A lot of us were doing field studies before the pandemic, and then we went home. We got comfortable behind the screens. Zoom interviews are, I will admit, much easier to run and much easier to recruit for and require a lot less effort. But the more you do field studies and the more you incorporate them into your research process, the easier it will become to do so. All right. So we miss out on so many learnings when we don't get out and experience the world of the user. I never would have learned how bad people are at measuring if I had stayed in the office that day. So let's talk about how we manage them. You're probably saying, okay, Bree, that's great. I'm so glad contextual inquiries are amazing and awesome and they can do so much. But how do I manage it? Why am I here, and what do I have to do to run one? So the biggest part of a contextual inquiry is the planning. The lead up to an onsite, the lead up to a field study is almost always more work than the onsite itself. So communicating with your point of contact, your user, your participant is important. Thinking of things like the logistics, the travel, the parking, all of that is important. But the biggest thing is that you are going to have to be flexible. I can promise you that it probably won't go exactly to plan. You will not find a parking spot. You will hit traffic. You will not be able to contact the participant. You will forget something at home. That's okay. Go do the inquiry. Go do the field study. Take what you can get out of it. Prepare the best that you can. Problem solve when needed. Call a friend when needed. And get the most out of it. And if things really go badly, well, it's a learning experience. And I've heard that those are really good for professional development, so. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the planning and what makes it successful. There's a lot of pieces that go into this. The key piece is making a clear set of goals. All right, seems obvious. I recommend making both a primary goal. What do you want to get out of the session? What does your team want to learn? But also make a secondary goal and maybe a tertiary goal. Because as you heard, sometimes things don't always go to plan. And sometimes you might find a participant is talking about something that actually we wanted to learn that and you have a lot more experience in that. Let's go dig into that area. So it helps goals, help guide your planning, helps kind of lay the foundation, helps with your screening criteria. I usually aim for 3 to 5 goals a session. I work with my team, I collaborate with them, I figure out what do we want to learn out of the session. The next thing is communication. This is huge. So you do your screening, you get a participant, you get a point person. In my case, sometimes it's restaurant managers when I'm here at Toast, sometimes it is the consumer themselves. And I honestly over-communicate with that participant. I tell them exactly what we are planning to do, exactly how long I think the session's gonna be. I usually tell them what I wanna get out of it without being too biasing. And I really just explain to them like, hey, here's exactly what my plan is. Do you have any advice? Which brings us to the third one. Don't be afraid to ask. If you wanna shadow someone, if you wanna go into the kitchen while you're at the restaurant, if you want to watch them do something in an area that may be off limits, just ask. 1, the person's probably gonna say yes. And 2, they might have an even better idea for how you can get whatever it is you wanna get done. So I've often found that if I communicate with the person, say, hey, I wanna get this out of this, or hey, we're trying to learn this, they say, oh, I should have you talk to XYZ person. They have a really good insight on this. I'll make sure they're there that day. Or if you come in on Thursday, that person's gonna be working that day. You should come in then. Awesome. So those are the 3 things. Clear goals, communicate, and always ask. All right, here are some insider tips I have for you. The first one, bring a backup for everything. This means chargers and batteries and recording devices and pens. Bring a backup coworker. If you have someone that's supposed to be coming, make sure you have another person that might be able to join you. Bring extra paper, an extra phone if you can. Trust me, you think you charged those batteries the night before, you didn't. They didn't charge, you need extras. Bring it all, even if you don't think you'll need it. I've also found that physical versions of things are much easier to manage than the digital ones. So this is things like consent forms. Yes, you can get an iPad out. Yes, they can sign on an iPad, but then the iPad dies, but then the link doesn't load, but then you can't get on the Wi-Fi. Just bring the physical copy of the consent form and bring a pen and have them sign it that way. Yes, it's a little bit more work. Yes, you have to keep it later. Maybe you have to scan it in. It's worth it every single time. Bring a physical notebook. Don't rely on using your computer for taking notes. 1, it's pretty awkward. Also, I have this giant computer, which is incredibly heavy to carry around. Bring a physical notebook, bring pens, and try and steer away from activities that are on the computer or the iPad. Now, I recognize that a lot of you do have products that are on the computer or the iPad, so that is fine. Have them use theirs, right? See the problem that they're experiencing with their computer, with their iPad, with their phone. You don't necessarily need to use yours. If you're doing an activity with them and you can make it a physical kind of paper activity, do that. It is so much more beneficial when that person is using their hands and sitting down and talking with you. The next thing is logistics. This one's huge. I've already mentioned it, but thinking through all the logistics, every single piece of what you need to think through will come in clutch. What's the parking situation? Will there be traffic? If you're in Boston, the answer is yes. It doesn't matter what time you're going. Do you not know what the parking situation is? Ask the person what the parking situation is. If they don't know what the parking situation is, look it up on Google Maps. Check if there is going to be traffic during that time, but again, give yourself more time. The worst that happens is you get there a little early, you watch some TikToks in the car. It's like really not the end of the world. Is there a dress code? We go into kitchens a lot, which means that we usually have to wear closed-toed shoes. We usually have to wear certain attire here at Toast. If you're gonna be shadowing a server, for example, oftentimes they're wearing a uniform. It's usually all black. Just ask the person, hey, should I wear anything specific? Hey, is there anything that I need to keep in mind with my attire? Are you gonna be outside? Bring a coat. Sunscreen too is also good. So yeah, plan all through all those logistics. How are you gonna take notes? How are you gonna record? This is, again, bring that physical notebook, have your computer if you need it, but ideally not. But really just think through every single piece. And finally, get up off your butt. This one is really easy to fall into as a trap. You get onto the location, you sit down with your person, you're talking to them, you're observing the people around you, and you're just sitting there and you're watching and you're not getting up. Get up, walk around, explore the different areas, go into different areas. If you're not sure if you're allowed to be there, ask or beg for forgiveness. Get up and move around. I promise you are gonna learn so much more if you get up. I fell into this, the very first one that I did at Toast. I got there, I was so excited to meet my coworkers for the first time. We're sitting at a booth, and then I forgot to get up. The whole night, I just sat there. And I was like, oh, it's really hard to actually observe consumer or server, or guest or server behavior sitting in this booth all day. I learned a few things. Mostly I learned about my coworkers though, because that's who I was talking to. Get up, walk around, go observe, take photos, take video, get permission to do so, but take those photos, take those videos. You can learn so much more. Okay, final thing. Well, almost. So you're probably thinking, great, awesome. I wanna go do a contextual inquiry. I've got some sweet tips to take with me. How do I get my manager to let me go? How do I get my team to let me go? Make a case for it. That's what I did my first one. I went to my manager and I said, hey, we could do this in the office, but I actually think it'll be more beneficial to go into people's homes. So I made the case for it. I said, it's a great opportunity for real world context. I think that's gonna be way more beneficial here. I think we're gonna uncover a lot more if we get them in their homes rather than in the office. So I made the case for it. Yeah, all right, I'll go on. Contextual inquiries also give you a competitive advantage. I've heard this stat, don't quote me on it, I don't know if it's actually real. 75% of researchers don't do field work. I don't know if that's true or not. The point being, a lot of researchers don't do field work. And if they do, then great, but most of them aren't. And most of your competitors and competitors' researchers are probably not doing field work. You go out and do them, that already gives you a competitive advantage. You do them more often, you're already raising the bar. Pretty much a win-win there. Finally, contextual inquiries are a great chance to validate and build empathy. I'm gonna emphasize the building empathy. So what I like to do when I go on contextual inquiries is actually bring coworkers that are not necessarily in my triad, but are on my team. Engineers are a great candidate for this. Reach out to your engineers, see who's willing to do it. Probably not gonna get any answers, reach out again. Maybe you have to directly reach out to them. Engineers are a great candidate for this because they often, the way that they think is, well, I don't understand why people can't do this. I don't understand why they don't understand. And then they watch and they see the participants struggling and they go, oh, okay. It's a great opportunity to build empathy. And every time I've done it, the next meeting I'm in with that engineer and with my triad, they're there advocating for the user. They're there thinking about the user and saying, well, when I watched that user, that's not how they did it. And they were thinking about it this way. And all of a sudden I'm like, great, awesome. I don't have to do anything now. So if you can bring an engineer, but honestly, any coworker is really beneficial. It's a great way to build empathy, and if you can't bring along people, then try and record as much as you can and really tell that story when you share back to your coworkers. All right. So to recap, now I'm almost done. What do I take away from today? Contextual inquiries are worth it. They're worth the planning and the logistics. I know it's hard, I know it's stressful, I know it's a little bit intimidating or anxiety-inducing. They are worth it. They're worth the planning. I promise you will learn something. I don't know what you'll learn, but you'll learn something. You'll also build a deeper understanding of your users to uncover unexpected insights. You'll probably have some good stories to tell, as I still am 5 years later, telling the story about the woman that can't measure. And honestly, they are a lot of fun. They're a great opportunity. I love every offsite that I do. And finally, get up, get out of the building. I know you can do it. And then I want to hear about it afterwards. All right, that's all I got.